Targeting Turkey. President Donald Trump responds to Ankara's military offensive against Kurdish forces. We're at the White House. Restoring Notre Dame. An update on the efforts to rebuild one of the most famous cathedrals in the world. Avoiding disruption. Analysis of the Holy Father's longtime security chief's decision to step down. And Fight for the Unborn. The March for Life unveils its theme for the 2020 pro-life event. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 15th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. President Trump is stepping up the pressure against Turkey, imposing sanctions and increasing tariffs on some Turkish goods. The White House is aiming to de-escalate a growing military crisis in Syria, but critics say the fighting was sparked by a decision from the president to withdraw American troops from the region. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. The White House denies the fighting came as a result of the president's decision to remove troops from Syria and stop support of Kurdish fighters who helped the U.S. defeat ISIS. Now, Vice President Mike Pence will travel to Turkey and try to negotiate an end to this new conflict.
The United States of America wants Turkey to stop the invasion, to implement an immediate ceasefire, and to begin to negotiate with Kurdish forces in Syria to bring an end to the violence.
President Trump is sanctioning Turkey. With an executive order, he's increased steel tariffs on the country and stopped negotiations for a trade deal. It's in response to Turkey's attack on the Kurds in Syria, an assault that came after President Trump stopped backing Kurdish fighters with U.S. troops. Vice President Mike Pence says the president isn't responsible for the violence.
The United States of America did not give a green light to Turkey to invade Syria.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham supports the sanctions after first being critical of the president's decision to pull out U.S. troops in northern Syria. But others say the sanctions won't help with the developing crisis.
It's not going to solve the problem. The problem has already been created by the president giving Turkey a green light to invade Syria. And they took advantage of that green light, and now we have this terrible problem.
UNICEF reports nearly 70,000 children have been displaced since the hostilities began in northern Syria. Open Doors USA says an estimated 40 to 50,000 Christians are caught in the conflict. And amid reports that supporters of ISIS have escaped Kurdish-run camps, there are concerns the terrorist group could regain power in the region. President Trump tweets, "After defeating 100% of the ISIS caliphate, I largely moved our troops out of Syria. Let Syria and Assad protect the Kurds and fight Turkey for their own land."
Though they are supportive of the sanctions on Turkey, the group In Defense of Christians says they remain concerned about Christians in northeast Syria. They say in the weeks since troops have been pulled from Syria, there have been dozens of confirmed reports on Christian communities, resulting in many civilian casualties as well as destruction of infrastructure.
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. The impeachment inquiry against President Trump is revealing a rift between some of his top advisors. New details are coming out as part of a probe by Democratic lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton reportedly called President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, a, quote, hand grenade who's going to blow everybody up. That's according to former White House aide Fiona Hill, who faced more than 10 hours of questioning yesterday on Capitol Hill. She's just one of the witnesses called to testify in the impeachment inquiry.
We're not supposed to talk about the substance of anything said in the room.
The probe was sparked by a whistleblower report that said President Trump asked Ukraine to investigate his political rival, Joe Biden, and his son, Hunter. Trump says the Bidens should be investigated, but says he did nothing wrong when he called the president of Ukraine. The White House released the transcript of the call in which Trump asked Giuliani to get involved in the case against the Bidens.
Rudy Giuliani has clearly been a leading force for the administration in defining a shadow foreign policy in Ukraine.
President Trump accused Hunter Biden of using his influence to score lucrative deals with Ukraine and China while his father was vice president. Hunter broke his silence, telling ABC News he did nothing wrong except use poor judgment because he didn't consider the political implications on his father's career. Republicans complain the impeachment inquiry is being held behind closed doors.
This should be an open proceeding. We should have open hearings on this. The American people should be able to watch this.
GOP members also say the whistleblower's identity should be revealed so people know who's making the accusations against the president.
You're sitting out here for 12 hours a day not knowing what's going on in there, and most members of Congress have no idea what's going on in there.
A steady stream of State Department officials are expected to testify during the impeachment probe this week, even though President Trump said his administration would not cooperate with the so-called kangaroo court. Join us now with his thoughts is Vince Coglianese, editorial director at the Daily Caller and co-host of Mornings on the Mall on WMAL Radio. Vince, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
What's your take on all these recent developments so far in the impeachment inquiry?
Yeah, I think the White House, after having a tough time figuring out how to approach this, has finally found its footing, and it's on this case of the secrecy with which this process is being conducted. Adam Schiff is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He's the most public-facing Democrat besides Nancy Pelosi pushing for impeachment, and Schiff has decided that he's going to keep the public out of this process entirely. We don't get to hear what actually transpires in these hearings. The little details we get are the snippets the Democrats choose to leak out, and that's just not a fair process, and one that Adam Schiff defended this past weekend in a CBS interview by claiming that if it goes public, if these hearings were public, that would only help the president's defense. It's an odd thing for a Democrat to say that if the hearings were public, the defense would help the president. But the truth is, the media, the public, everyone is owed clarity in a process that seeks to ultimately overturn the will of the American people and throw an elected president out of office.
Well, noting that, what do you think about how all this is playing out in the public eye, in the public view? Who's really winning here? Is it the president? Is it the Democrats?
Well, at this moment, if you were just to go based on public opinion polling, the president has lost some ground. I mean, there's definitely polling showing that more and more people are heading in the direction of supporting impeachment. But what does that really mean? Does it mean that they want to throw the president out of office, or do they want these proceedings to go forward so that all of the information can be heard and people can make a decision for themselves? Because that option is there, and that's what these are supposed to be. Typically, the House votes for impeachment, and then the proceeding plays out in public, and then people can render their own judgment. And the American public should, if they're going to pursue this, the American public should have a chance to hear it. I mean, ultimately, we're not that far away from the next election anyway, and the public is going to get to have a choice regardless of what Congress does.
Finally, we got to hear from Hunter Biden, the son of former Vice President Joe Biden. We were waiting to see if he was going to say anything. What did you make of his comments, and do you think that any of this will be a problem based on what he said or what he's done in his father's presidential campaign?
Well, this is a big moment for Joe Biden. He's slipping in the polls. Elizabeth Warren is increasingly leading the available polls, showing that he's got to figure out a way to recover. And this has damaged him. I think people see this and they realize that there is a sort of everyday Washington-style nepotism involved here. When your son can make $50,000 a month for having no other qualification than being named Biden when he works for this Ukrainian natural energy company and also gets these huge contracts in China. This is rough for the Bidens. And even this morning in that interview, Hunter Biden said out loud, yeah, the only reason I really had the job was because my last name was Biden. I don't think that does Joe Biden any favors.
It is very concerning. Earlier in the show, Mark Irons had mentioned the White House's response to Turkey. What do you make of the president's plan with these sanctions?
Well, the president is looking for a way to hold Turkey accountable without subjecting American troops in harm's way. Ultimately, think about this entire situation. The president has said the reason he's trying to pull troops out is because he's living up to his campaign promise. His view of this is nothing about this was shooting from the hip, despite what you hear in the press. This all emanated from what he promised long ago in that 2016 campaign, and now that he's living out as president, to get us out of entanglements in the Middle East that ultimately are going to continue whether or not we're there. The question is, what are the goals? And the president said, enough. Pull the troops out, and in the meantime, hold Turkey accountable for going after the Kurds. It's a tough situation, but this is, I think, the administration's effort to try and say that can't be abided, so they're going to hit them with sanctions, and Vice President Mike Pence is on the way, of course, to negotiate with the Turkish people as well.
A lot of important issues this week. Vince Coglianese, editorial director at the Daily Caller. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
The former Vatican police chief and bodyguard to Pope Francis says he's grateful for being able to serve the Holy Father with honor. Domenico Gianni resigned yesterday after reports of a security memo leak related to the Vatican's financial investigation. Officials say Gianni was not forced to step down, but chose to in order to avoid any disruption. Edward Pentin, Rome correspondent from the National Catholic Register, joins us now. Edward, the Vatican says Gianni bears no personal responsibility for this memo leak, so why did he resign?
Well, Wyatt, he said that he was ashamed of what happened. He said that although he wasn't personally responsible, he felt a responsibility for it. And so he basically sort of took a hit for the team, as it were, and offered his resignation, which was accepted. But it is rather odd because he wasn't guilty of the leak. We still don't know who actually leaked this information. But as I say, he's taken the hit really because he says that he feels sacrifice. He lived really a life of sacrifice for the Pope, and he sees this as also sort of laying down his life, his job for the Pope, because of the damage that's been done.
What reputation does he have in the Vatican? I understand he's been around for several decades.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting because he's been around so long. He's actually got quite a lot of information on a lot of people in the Vatican, especially through the VatiLeaks scandals of 2012 and 2015. And some say that he became too powerful, and this is why some are speculating whether this is the real reason why he resigned, or whether it's because he just became too powerful within the job that he held. And obviously the job that he did have brought him very close to different people, and he had lots of information on different people, and particularly within the realms of finances. And there's also speculation that he got rather too close to the old guard and was defending the old guard against the reforms that Pope Francis had been trying to put through regarding Vatican finances.
It's interesting how all this is happening at the same time. There is this investigation over the Vatican Bank. Is there likely to be any more resignations? What do you think are the long-term consequences of his stepping down?
Yes, it's difficult to say whether there'll be any more resignations. Certainly, as you say, there's this investigation going on within the finances, and that may herald or bring about some more resignations, perhaps those who were working in the Secretariat of State during the times of this investigation, which was in the sort of early 2010s. So we'll just have to see about that. But certainly the prospects for Vatican security seem okay. The Vatican announced Domenico Gianni's successor today. He's Commander Broccoletti, who's served in the Vatican police since 1995 and is very experienced, and was actually Domenico Gianni's deputy until since last year. So it seems as though the Vatican security, at any rate, seems to be okay for the future.
It's a very interesting story, and like you say, there's a lot of speculation as a result of all this. Obviously, we'll continue to keep our eye on that and the overall investigation into the Vatican finances itself. Edward Pentin, Rome correspondent from the National Catholic Register. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Pope Francis tells the faithful to learn to point the finger at themselves and not at others.
Le invidie, le gelosie che fanno apparire un modo di.
At his daily Mass at the Vatican, the Holy Father says true Christians avoid being hypocrites. The greatest example of someone who appears one way but acts another is the devil. But the Pope says we don't have to follow his example. Instead, all we have to do is open our hearts to Christ. France's culture minister says work crews will soon take the next step in restoring Paris's Notre Dame cathedral. In the next few weeks, they'll remove the melted scaffolding on top of the cathedral. The twisted metal has remained in place since the April 15th fire burned the medieval structure, which was under renovation at the time. Engineers waited to remove it right away so they wouldn't risk damaging the structure. Coming up, we go back to Rome to hear from one of the participants in the Vatican Synod on the Amazon. And the nation's largest annual pro-life rally announces its theme for the 2020 event. Church leaders meeting in the Vatican wrap up the first phase of the Synod on the Amazon. Today, clergy members and lay experts on the region discuss how to evangelize through bilingual education and respect for indigenous cultures. One education advocate spoke at today's meetings about programs that can help children. Leah Rose Casimiro, academic coordinator for the Quality Bilingual Education Program, joins us now from Rome. She's from southwest of Guyana and began working with the program 2 years ago. Leah, I understand you spoke at the Synod today. What was your message to the bishops?
My main message, well, I shared my experience as an Wapichan Indigenous student in the city at university. I shared what that experience was like, and I also shared about the experience of the Quality Bilingual Education program and what positive results are coming out of that, as well as the importance of dialogue, because that was the only reason that we have gotten so far with our program.
Speaking of dialogue, I want to get your reaction to how you think the discussions at the Senate have been going so far. I mean, do you think that the participants there, the bishops and the lay experts, are open to the needs of the indigenous people?
Well, first of all, I think it is great that we have representations from all the 9 Amazonian countries, and we also have indigenous people there who are able to give their interventions in the plenary. So altogether, I think the whole point is about listening and learning. So for those who might not be too familiar with the experiences of us in Amazonian people, they are able to listen and learn, and we are also able to listen to their point of views on certain issues.
1 in 3 children in one of the indigenous communities never pass the exam that gets them into secondary school. Can you tell us why that is, what's going on with the indigenous people, and what your program is doing to help?
Well, one of the reasons we think that our children don't do well at school is because we attend our formal education at the expense of our own language and culture and our identity. And that is really scary for our children. And we are hoping that with our program coming on board, it will be much easier for children to learn, to transition mainly from home to school, because it's a whole other new experience for them. And we're doing that through the use of our language, our culture, our traditions, and so on. So materials created to be suitable for them.
And like we say, education is one of just so many problems that the indigenous peoples are having to face. How do you think the Catholic Church can help? What can the church do?
Well, first of all, they are the ones helping us right now financially and spiritually on this project, the 2-year project that we are doing. And in conversation with them, in dialogue with the church, the Jesuit priests and the community members, and the support of the church, this is what we came up with, this project. So it's basically a partnership with all the people I just mentioned involved. So I think this is one way that the church can help, and they are helping us in this way. And if we can move forward like that, with dialogues like that, that would produce good fruit for our people, I think that's the way to go.
Dialogue sounds like it's so important right now. Well, it's so interesting to hear this from a perspective of the indigenous community. Leah Rose Casimiro, Academic Coordinator for the Quality Bilingual Education Program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, reaction to the governor of California signing a pro-abortion bill, and an update on the annual March for Life in January in the nation's capital. A new law in California is likely to spur thousands of sexual abuse lawsuits, including some against the Catholic Church. Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom signed a measure that gives childhood victims of abuse until the age of 40 to file a suit. The previous limit was 26 years old. The State School Boards Association says the bill poses a threat to smaller school districts. The law takes effect January 1st. Governor Newsom also signed a bill last Friday requiring public colleges and universities to provide abortion pills at their medical centers. Pro-lifers immediately reacted. California Family Council said in a statement, Governor Newsom's decision is infuriating and outrageous. He has chosen the accolades of abortion activists over the safety of students. Joining me now via satellite from Sacramento, California is Greg Burt, Director of Capital Engagement at the California Family Council. Greg, thanks so much for joining us. The state's former governor, Jerry Brown, vetoed a similar bill. Was there anything different about this one, and why do you think it was signed now?
No, these bills were almost identical. And you just have a brand new governor who wants to state to the whole nation that he is more pro-abortion than Jerry Brown. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for women and their unborn babies. And it's really sad. I mean, Jerry Brown actually said the bill was not necessary because around each of our public colleges, We already have abortion clinics providing these services. Why does the state and these state colleges have to get into the abortion business? But that didn't stop Gavin Newsom.
It's very interesting because Jerry Brown himself is a Democrat, so it's interesting the split even among them. Explain, Greg, how this bill works. Are there any mandatory follow-up appointments for these women, or can they just simply go in and get abortion pills?
Well, this is how it works. Each of these colleges have these health centers, which are really basic, provide basic health care. They're triage centers. They don't take insurance. You know, they're supported by student fees. And so now these student health centers are going to be required to provide the abortion pill. And in order to provide an abortion pill, you have to have ultrasound because it only works on unborn babies up to 10 weeks. You're going to have to train medical staff. You're going to have to create a billing system, all the things that these health centers don't have currently. So it's going to be very expensive. And in the end, student fees are going to go up, tuition is going to go up, and the government's going to be be responsible for maintaining these, really now they're abortion clinics going forward.
And noting all these issues, potential issues, things that could arise as a result of this, is there anything that Californians could do or the lawmakers could do to have this bill overturned?
Well, there's always the, you can gather signatures and repeal the law by putting it on the ballot. I don't see that happening at this point, but that's what people could do. Really, we need to make sure that everybody who is pro-life in the state reaches out to those legislators that voted for this bill, and they need to hear from people, and people have to stop voting for these legislators. Until that happens, these kind of bills are going to continue to be passed.
And this is just one of many issues your group has been following. Leading into the 2020 election, can you tell us what else your group is working on, what else you guys are following?
Well, we're really concerned about bills that seek to limit and ban therapy for people who have unwanted same-sex desires or gender confusion. This is now going to be, just last week, the Democratic debates included calls to ban what they're calling conversion therapy. But this is not just affecting licensed counselors, and they're now going and telling priests and pastors and anybody else who might give advice to people seeking to get help to live according to their faith. They're actually censoring private conversations. The First Amendment protects private conversations from being regulated by the government. This is something we are really concerned about, and we need to push back and speak up.
Okay, some very important issues there, and ones obviously we'll continue to follow into the new year. Greg Burt, Director of Capital Engagement at the California Family Council, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
In just 100 days, pro-lifers will converge on Washington for the annual March for Life. Hundreds of thousands of people are expected to hit the streets on January 24th, right at the start of an election year. Today, the largest pro-life rally in the country reveals their 2020 theme. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports.
A yearly ritual since the Supreme Court legalized abortion nationwide.
Pro-life Americans will once again flood these streets, replacing these cars going up Constitution Avenue and ending their march right here at the U.S. Supreme Court.
And with 100 days to go, the March for Life reveals their 2020 theme.
Life empowers. Pro-life is pro-women.
So often you hear that in order to be pro-woman, you have to be pro-choice, and yet nothing could be further from the truth.
You'll see that theme in editorials, like this one today.
This is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which allowed women the right to vote. So we're going to be studying some of the early suffragists and how they were pro-life and how they understood that life is empowering for women, that abortion, to use the words of Alice Paul, is the ultimate exploitation of women.
But they're up against Planned Parenthood, which is already investing $45 million into the elections.
Get your bans off my body.
The nation's largest abortion provider is targeting President Trump. He spoke to the 2018 March for Life.
The March for Life is a movement born out of love.
And again this year.
Every child is a sacred gift from God.
But March for Life leaders tell me it's too early to say if he'll speak again in 2020, a crucial election year. At the Capitol, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
And of course, stick with EWTN as we approach the March for Life, and of course, all-day coverage during the rally as well. And that concludes our newscast for tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.